Here at the Peepshow podcast, we talk a lot about supporting sex workers. And one way you can support sex workers is by paying for your porn.
Why not take this opportunity to support queer porn made by queer porn stars? Queerporn.tv is offering $10 memberships all summer long. Being a Queerporn.tv VIP guest grants you access to all of their exclusive scenes featuring all kinds of queer hotties from around the world. We love it, and we know you will too. Welcome to the Peepshow podcast.
News and stories from the sex industry.
With Jessie and PJ Sage. Welcome back to another episode of the Peepshow podcast. This week we are answering listener questions. We talk about a range of topics, starting with my reaction to my first Star Trek episode. We also talk about the recording equipment we use, what it's like to be a couple in the sex industry, and how the industry has changed since we started.
Hey, I'm Adrian, one of the hosts of After Adult Podcast. My porn name should be Mozart Fremont, but you probably know me better by my actual porn name, Siri.
I'm Rachel, but my porn name would be Woody 16th Avenue.
After Adult is a podcast about life and porn.
I don't actually watch porn.
I don't really watch that much porn either. I probably watch more than you, but I mean, most of the time it kind of would feel like going to work on my day off.
You 100% watch more than me, because I don't watch porn. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for After Adult.
Or visit afteradult.com and follow us on Instagram at afteradult.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Peepshow podcast.
Welcome.
Did you like that?
What?
I use my radio voice.
Oh, I know. Well, we have these new microphones, and so it looks like we are doing a radio program.
Exactly. I mean, they are like radio microphones.
Are they? Is that like what they are?
Yeah, they're used for lots of things, but they're very popular in radio stations.
Oh, okay.
And so it makes me want to bust out my radio announcer voice. It's like my FM commercial.
Yeah, the DJ PJ. DJ PJ on the air.
Sunday. Monster Truck Rally.
Okay, this is ridiculous. You know what? The other thing that's funny about this is that because the mics pick up differently, we are now facing each other, and we've never faced each other.
We've never faced each other before. No, that's true.
Yeah.
You know.
I can stare at you googly-eyed.
Oh my God, that's creepy.
Yeah, so we have new mics and we are looking at each other and it's very romantic. So this show should make all of your guys' hearts flutter.
Yeah, definitely. Get fluttering.
Fluttering. Yeah, and actually, this is a good episode for this new setup because we are doing something different today.
We are. This is maybe one of the weirdest Peepshow podcasts of all Peepshow podcast time.
Yeah.
We don't even have a guest.
We don't have a guest, and we did that on purpose. It's not that we just couldn't find one. We did that because we thought, after 60 episodes of focusing on other people, maybe we would, take questions from the audience and do something a little bit different.
And questions you had.
Yeah, so we have 4 questions from 3 different people, and we are going to play them for you and answer them.
Okay. Cue question 1.
That was very silly. Yeah, go ahead. Why don't we just go ahead and start?
Yeah, that's what cue question 1 means.
Okay.
This episode of the Peepshow podcast is sponsored by Quick and Dirty Media.
Are you an independent content creator, webcam model, or clip maker? Quick and Dirty Media can help you with your video editing and production needs at a reasonable price, allowing you to devote more time to creating your content. As a special offer for Peepshow podcast listeners, the first 5 content creators who submit a video for editing will receive their first order free. Make sure to use the promo code PeepshowPod. Find Quick and Dirty Media on Twitter at QuickDirtyMedia or send an email to info@quickanddirtymedia.com. Quick and Dirty Media is proud to be an adult-friendly business.
Hi, I'm Princess Purple, and my original question was, what's Jesse's reaction to a full season of Star Trek? But I don't think that's going to be possible, so I'll just settle for what's Jesse's reaction to the first Star Trek episode she ever watched. And my other question is, what recording equipment do you use? Do you have any favorites or recommendations that might make other people's lives easier when recording? Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right.
Yeah, so Star Trek.
Yeah, we've all been waiting for it. Well, we should say we will get to the gear question.
Yeah, we're going to get to the gear question because another person also asked about that. But we will start with Star Trek.
We will definitely start with Star Trek. I mean, let's not bury the lead here.
Yeah, okay. So as a lot of you who follow us on Twitter know that we kind of crowdsourced this questions because PJ wanted to know where we should start and what do you call it? What generation? What like
what series?
What series? Okay,
Yeah.
what series of Star Trek we should watch? And you all, our listeners, decided that we should go with The Next Generation. And so PJ picked an episode out of that last night, and we tried to watch it. And we did watch it. I shouldn't say we tried to watch it. We actually watched it. And then what we tried to do was do this podcast, and it was a bit of a wreck.
It was a bit of a wreck, yeah. That's fair to say.
It caused very long discussions between the two of us about how we could possibly be married.
Okay, that's overstating it a little bit.
Okay, it's overstating it a little bit.
But you were very confused. Perhaps I picked the episode poorly. I picked Darmok because I thought it was very philosophical. But you just thought that it was very confusing, which is fair because it's kind of like a mystery and you're supposed to go into the episode being like, what was going on? But you were just like, I don't even know what's going on in this whole series. And
well, okay. It was so like, okay, I have, despite the fact that PJ and I have been together for some time and he's like obsessive about Star Trek.
I mean, I am a big Star Trek nerd, but like there are way bigger nerds. Like I don't know Klingon or anything. I just want to...
Okay. All right. Sorry. You don't know Klingon. No, I don't know anything about Star Trek. And so we were watching it and I was very confused. And because I'm like really not good at suspension of disbelief, I spent a lot of time like hyper focusing on totally trivial things. For example, when the alien commander guy was talking and he was supposed to be speaking his own language, but he was using prepositions that were in English, I was super confused. And I was like, why is he blending these languages like that? And I couldn't get past that. And then PJ was like, well, because they have a translator, but
a universal translator.
Okay. I didn't
know.
No,
you're right. That was unfair. That was an important piece of information that I'm surprised they didn't like really include in the episode. I mean, I think they mentioned it in passing, but there's no way a casual watcher would pick
like
that
there was
up.
just so many things like that I was like, what is happening here? None of this makes sense. It doesn't seem coherent to me. I don't know who these people are. I understand the point they're trying to make about metaphor, but like everything else around it was so confusing that I just like shut down.
Yeah, okay. So that didn't work. So we took a little break and we ended up picking a different episode that maybe was a little bit easier to hang with. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, like, I mean, maybe I should just say, we bring up Star Trek a lot because I am kind of like a big Star Trek nerd. And, I always appreciate how many of our listeners and our interviewees are also Star Trek nerds. And we've had some really great moments on this podcast. Mm-hmm. One of our guests, Ella, we found out actually lived with one of the Klingons from Deep Space Nine for a while. The actor.
You nerded out about that.
Yeah, not the actual Klingon. I mean, because, Klingons aren't real. And
that was an important side note. Okay.
No.
Go on.
Yeah. So it's been really great. But no, I do want to say, just to set this all up, to set the stakes here. I'm a big nerd. Like, let's get real. I have like a schematic of the Starship Enterprise hanging over, my desk here, but not anywhere else in the house because, that's not allowed. For me, Star Trek holds a really special place in my heart. I grew up in middle America. I grew up in an airport town / suburb. pinched between like a dying steel town and farmland.
Mm-hmm.
So very middle America, very conservative area, very Catholic area with a Catholic upbringing, and like very hegemonically masculine working class area. And so for me, like, Star Trek wasn't just like a window into some fantasy world or like some other galaxy or whatever. I mean, it was really like a window into a different value system. I mean, that shit's radical, right? Like, they're imagining a future, like a post-capitalist future where money's obsolete, right? And people are pursuing self-realization, but not profit, and like the betterment of human knowledge. That was one thing that was like, I think, really powerful. And then, the other thing for me is just like the portrayals of like men and masculinity in the show. For me, it was like revelatory. It was like I really found a lot personally in these portrayals that was like deeply meaningful.
That's so interesting that like that's your background and that's like what you get out of it, and I think that's probably what a lot of people get out of it. But when like I watched particularly like the Darmok episode, I actually felt like the way that they were interacting was like masculine to a degree that like I couldn't connect with it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that PJ was saying about that episode in particular is he was like, oh, but it was really beautiful because you had these two like men who were trying so desperately to like communicate and feel understood by one another. Well, that wasn't like legible to me in the same sort of way, but also like I grew up in a house full of women. I have 3 sisters. I did not grow up in like very masculine environment, and so like it doesn't have the same sort of
resonance to
me. Yeah, I was just like, they're sitting at boardrooms like that, like even just the environment seemed like super masculine to me, and I was like, I don't know why I should relate to this.
Right. No, that's legit. I mean, it is kind of like a militaristic, like pseudo-military thing.
Even the way they interact, the way that they're talking to each other with titles, it's like not warm. It's like cold and workplacey.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I do. And certainly when you go back to the original series, it is like pretty hyper masculine, like, more hegemonically masculine, especially Kirk, the captain, it's just like, I don't know, sleeping with women, getting into fist fights, like kind of like tough guying his way out of situations. And that is kind of the legacy that Star Trek, the 90s series are building off of. But even in the early series, there were just real gems of like thoughtful intellectual engagement. There were lots of situations where they like didn't solve the problem by blowing shit up. They had to like really figure something out. And I think also importantly, both the original series and the Next Generation, a woman writer, one of the like earliest TV sci-fi women writers, DC Fontana, was prominent in both of those series, wrote a number of episodes. And so like,
no, I'm not trying to like take that away from you. I'm just saying that it's like interesting that like that's how you're approaching it and how like radical you think it is, where like from the position that I am, I'm like, oh, but it's actually too masculine for me to relate to.
Yeah. No, and that's legit. And it's radical, but it was also radical for like 1988, right? So I mean, we have to be fair too. Like it means a lot to me because I have a sentimental attachment to it. More than a sentimental attachment, it was like formative in the person that I am, because that was what was available to me in the early 90s in middle America as like a possibility, a way of being. That wasn't this hyper masculine thing that I hated. Yeah. And that, felt super alien to me. I mean, I talked about this a little bit on the show, but like I've always struggled with my gender and I've always struggled with my masculinity. And so for me, like having any sort of alternative role models, possibilities was like really powerful. And there just wasn't much of that where I was located at that time in history. It's different now. I mean, this is pre-internet, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm not trying to say by 2020 standards that this is necessarily super radical.
Right.
But in context, I do think it has kind of a radical history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I felt it was really meaningful to me. I mean, I spent so much of my early years playing pretend, like running around the yard, imagining being in Star Trek,
Really?
Yeah. And it's interesting for me because like it was so influential to me. The only other thing that had this kind of level of influence on my life, apart from like the Catholicism or whatever that I wrestled with for so many years, was eventually like punk rock, when I became a teen. And like eventually I, put away my Still in the Box Micro Machines Star Trek box set,
Yeah.
and kind of like sort of hid my dorky Star Trek obsession to become like a cool punk, mohawk skater dude, cool in scare quotes. And really, for a long time, it was just like this secret thing that I enjoyed that only like much later in life, I realized like how many people around me were into it.
Oh, really? Did you feel like embarrassed by it?
Well, it's not that I was embarrassed. It just didn't feel like anyone else was into it.
Oh,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, I really didn't feel embarrassed. Like, it meant so much to me that I was just like, I don't fucking care how you feel about it,
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's never embarrassment, I guess.
You just didn't think that other people would have related
Yeah,
to it in the way
there
that
just
you
was
did.
no community,
Yeah.
for me, and I never was looking for like Star Trek fandom,
Yeah.
at like
You didn't
conventions
write like fanfic or anything.
no, or like on
Yeah.
the internet. I wasn't like that wild into it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, actually, my parents were into Star Trek, and that was interesting too. So this is another story. Part of the reason that it was available to me is like, my parents were kind of very restrictive about like media consumption. We didn't have cable. We were only allowed to watch like an hour of TV a day or something.
Mhm.
But Star Trek didn't count.
Why?
I don't know, because they liked it, because they wanted to watch it anyways.
Oh, weird.
And like, the new episodes were airing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they would like watch it. And I feel like we got completely different things out of it.
Mhm.
But part of it was like what was accessible to me too.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we watched another episode today. It was better than the Darmok one. It was about Data creating...
Data.
Oh, Data. It was about Data. It was about Data creating a spawn and parenting issues.
It was called The Offspring.
Yeah, so we watched The Offspring. That was more interesting to me, like as a parent. So, I mean, I have a lot of different like feels about this episode. So it was interesting to me to watch it because I obviously watched that episode like through the lens of being a parent. More than that, I watched it through the lens of being a parent of a kid with autism. And I think that there is something like interesting about Data and Data's daughter who are both like androids, but they're both androids who like are struggling to pick up on social cues. And like watching him like try to teach his daughter how to pick up on social cues was interesting to me because I feel like we've spent a lot of time trying to teach our son like how to greet somebody when they walk into the room, which we haven't actually been successful at. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it was about like how we teach our children socialization in this like very sped up sort of way, because obviously like he has a child who can already talk and things like that, and then has to explain like social interactions on top of that. And that's obviously like an artificial situation. I don't know. I don't actually have like a fully formed.
Yeah, I don't think you have to have a fully formed
Yeah.
thing. I mean, you can just say that it resonated with you. I mean, obviously, you're not like saying our son is an android.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be afraid. Like, I don't think anyone's gonna interpret it that way. But like, as a parent, who has struggled to, teach your son how to relate to
the world and how to interact with people and how to, I mean, we've had to like really explicitly try to get him to like acknowledge people and acknowledge what they're doing and how they're feeling.
If there is something to say from that, is that like, honestly, back in, I think this was season 5, so something like 93, back in 1993, they probably weren't thinking a lot about autism. Like that probably wasn't as much in their frame of reference when they were writing these stories. So, I mean, it's interesting too that this maybe resonates differently in 2020 for you, but maybe for more people than, maybe it did in 1993. That's just, kind of interesting how that works, how we can kind of relate to these stories differently.
Yeah.
Based on where we're sitting both in our like personal lives and in like a moment in history.
The best scene, I think, in that episode was where Dada said that like he couldn't feel love for his daughter back. And the interesting thing about that to me was that he did feel that. He just didn't know how to like process that feeling. Like, and so I was thinking like, actually what's interesting about this is that all of his actions and everything that he's doing like is actually exhibiting like a love for her, but he just doesn't think about it like that. And I think that that's kind of an interesting way to talk about how like different people have different ways in which they process what they're thinking and what they're feeling, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not thinking or feeling those things.
Yeah, that there's more than one way to like have feelings or, to display, in particular love. I mean, we talk about love languages and those sorts of things, but that he, presumably was relating love to like a very specific physiological response that he wasn't capable of having.
Right.
But and actually Dr. Crusher even kind of said, he says, well, I'm incapable of experiencing love. And as he's walking out of the room, she's like, somehow I really, doubt that, like, kind of making your point, I think that like, well, it depends on what you interpret love. And if you define it as this very narrow thing, physiological response, then maybe that's not something he's capable of. But if you define it as like
devotion,
a set of behaviors, and
because love can be a behavior and it can be a practice. Like I think that what data
hard A,
okay,
like date.
Okay, I think what Data was doing was enacting like a set of practices that were the practices of a love of a child. And I think we often think of love as something that you have to like feel and then act upon. But actually, I think that like going through the motions of love also like generate that.
Yeah, even shapes you as a person, right? Like, and that's part of it too, right? Like Data's trying to discover his own humanity, and so like, there's this question of like, well, is he capable of it? And it's like, well, yeah, but maybe you become capable of it through doing it, right? Like there's some sort of paradox there that like,
yeah, I mean, I think in our culture we have this very like romantic notion of love that like love is just this like, especially in terms of romantic love.
You're struck by Cupid's arrow, right?
Yeah,
like that's literally the metaphor.
Yeah, and then you start acting on it because of the love. And I think that it can also look very different than that.
Yeah. And I kind of think they tease at that a little bit too. Like, I don't know if you noticed at the very end, he's kind of staring off into space while he's doing his work, but that it seems to have like affected him, in a deep way.
Right. And he talks about it in this very clinical way, like, oh, I took some of her memories and I put them inside of my head. But like, actually, we do that in all of the relationships that we have.
Right, exactly.
Like, we carry people and we carry the relationships that we've had like in us. And so that is like that's a very technical explanation for a very human thing that we do.
I agree. And I mean, of course, it was technical for him, but like,
right, but that doesn't mean that like the end result wasn't the same.
Right. Yeah. Humanizing or
right.
Like speaking to his humanity. So, to wrap up on this question, where do we stand on Star Trek now?
Where do we stand on Star Trek?
I hear Princess Burple taking a deep, breath.
Your first choice wasn't great.
I stand corrected. I now know that.
The second one was better.
See, I thought the first one you'd find interesting. So it wasn't like I was trying to make you miserable or anything.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I mean, you are, like a philosopher, I thought.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I am, but I don't know. It was too much.
Okay.
It was too much of like a world that I didn't know anything about. It was like a culture shock to try to make sense of all of
Yeah,
that.
I understand that.
So where do I stand on it? I would probably sit down and watch another episode with you. I would not say that I'm like converted. How's that?
Honestly, that's far better than I expected. So I'm pretty excited.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we should talk about tech.
I was wondering if you guys could talk about your setup, like mics, recording software, editing software, maybe give some recommendations for some different budgets, some different things.
Yeah, so this question comes from one of our listeners, Annex, and it's a really similar question to the question Purple asked. So
So I'll just pass the hat to you on this one.
oh, that's a great idea because I could talk all day about tech equipment. So I'll just start. Okay, I've got nothing to say. Got nothing to say about tech equipment.
Oh, you probably have a few things to say, but
Okay, so we have a division of labor in this relationship, and tech is not on my side of the division of labor. If, however, you have ever interacted with the Peep Show Twitter account or the email or, anything, it's me.
Oh, that's not true. That's only true 98.9% of the time.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so, I mean...
I usually answer emails and DMs once a month, so just,
Yeah, no, so I don't actually know anything about the tech equipment. All I know, this is what I can tell you that I know about it. PJ changes it every 3 weeks.
It's not even true. The last microphones we had for okay.
I don't believe you.
We had for a year and a half.
No, that's such a lie.
But okay, let's go through. Let's answer the actual question.
Okay,
So,
all right.
What are we using? I'll take the question in parts. So we actually just switched microphones. So I don't know. I mean, I guess,
We always switch microphones. We have tried so many microphones. And do you want to know what else?
Mea culpa, I guess, or whatever.
We've also, I've done tons and tons of testing of different microphones.
That's true, you have.
Yeah, okay. So go ahead.
Right now, we are using Shure SM7Bs, which are kind of a luxury. They're radio broadcast microphones, kind of famously what Thriller was recorded on. And, they're $500 a pop. So they're...
You said they were $400.
They are $400 a pop.
Okay.
They are. It wasn't a lie. So they're certainly not something I would recommend for beginners. And honestly, there are a lot of mics that are substantially cheaper that can get you comparable or near comparable sound quality.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that we switched to these mics really is practical. It's just about my time, basically. It's about reducing the editing workload.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple reasons for that. One, with these mics, what's great is that they are really not super sensitive to popping noises.
Mm-hmm.
They've got these big wind guards, so you can be I'm an inch away from it, and you can be Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. And on a lot of microphones...
How does the rest of it go?
I don't actually. I forget. You're the one who knows that.
A peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where's the pickle pick? I messed it up.
Yeah.
Okay. He made me do this a million times. That's why I know it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I did teach you. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, though.
Yeah, but I kept saying over the lazy river.
Yeah, that was funny. Anyways, so, what's nice about these is that they're really pretty immune to popping noises, especially if you have the big windscreen on them. And so that's helpful in avoiding post-production work. And the other thing, the most important thing is that because you're talking right on top of them, you can turn them down fairly low. And that means you don't get as much bleed. And that's particularly an issue for us because we are sitting right next to each other in the same room. And so bleed is always an annoying problem. And it's, you're always going to get some bleed on a mic, but including this mic, but at least this mic, it's not like echoey, annoying bleed like you get on a shotgun mic or something. And so it's just, you don't have to worry as much about like my voice pick up on your mic or vice versa and having that sound bad and echoey and kind of ruin the sound quality. So that's why we kind of sprung for ultimately this as kind of a luxury, not something I would have bought in necessarily in our first or even second year of podcasting, but we're doing this every week now, and doing the mixing work is exhausting.
Yeah.
And I'm just like trying to free up an hour or so of mixing work every week.
Yeah.
And I figure it'll pay for itself. And if we could do this for a couple more years. So
Yeah. Okay. So that's microphones. What else do we have?
Okay, so that's what we use for a microphone. And that is connected to a MixPre 3, which is an audio, like a portable audio recorder / interface that is often used for like doing dialogue in movies because it is portable and you can like plug a battery into the back of it, which is great because when we go to conventions and stuff, I can take it to AVN. I can just haul it anywhere. But then when I'm at my desk, I can just plug it into the computer. It's only necessary for more professional quality mics that can't be plugged in via USB. A lot of mics like the kind of standard mic right now for camming and that sort of thing is the Blue Yeti, and what's nice about the Blue Yeti is it has a built-in preamp. You can plug it right into your computer. And there's a lot of other mics like that are on the market, but more professional mics, you need to run them into a preamp first before you connect them to your computer. And you also have to have a device that like converts it to digital, right? So that's what this little box does. There's a million options. I've tried a lot of different interfaces out. And this one, when I first use it, I just thought it was amazing. And more than anything I've ever tried for voice, it just sounds natural. When I'm listening back, Jessie, and I'm like playing your voice through the speakers, I can legit get confused whether or not you're in the room. I just think the preamps in this thing are awesome, and they're just so like true to life. And honestly, if somebody like handed me $2,000 and was like, pick any interface you want, I'd probably just like decline it and keep this one. That's how much I like it. Like, there couldn't be something that's more perfect for what we do.
Oh, okay.
And because it is also portable. And there is a newer version, but like the features that they add aren't really particularly useful for podcasting.
Oh, okay.
So, somebody was like looking to get serious. This is definitely the interface I'd recommend. I think you can probably get them used between $400 and $500 now. So that's kind of the higher end.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask. So you didn't really answer the question of like, if you were going to get a microphone that wasn't $400, like what would you get?
No, that's legit. I just thought maybe they'd be interested in
what we're actually using.
For starters.
Because we've like used a whole bunch of things, and this is what we just recently landed on.
Right. We've tried a lot of different things. I mean, like I said before, I was like really into punk rock. I mean, I learned how to do like studio recording stuff, recording into an 8-track in a basement, with punk rock bands. And like, I kind of stepped away from audio production for like a decade. And when I came back, I didn't have any equipment. We got a Blue Yeti. And that's how we started. And we literally sat on either side of it and talked into the same microphone.
I don't remember this at all.
Oh, that's what we did.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember.
And it sounded terrible.
Oh, okay.
And our early episodes sound terrible.
They do sound terrible. Yeah. This is true.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. When you guys go back and listen to the beginning episodes, I hate it when people are like, oh, I started at episode 1. And I was like, oh, God, don't do that.
We need to put like a disclaimer on that. Right. So, I mean, it was terrible, especially, again, because it's two people. I mean, we're in a unique situation. We're two people in the same room. If you're camming or you're starting your own podcast as one person, or you're like Skyping in other people, so you're the only person in the room, completely different set of concerns. But for us, we have to worry about being two people in a room, and that makes like a setup substantially more complicated. So in terms of what I would recommend for someone starting out. Again, I mentioned the Blue Yeti. That's probably the most common one. It's not a bad sounding microphone. And I think if you're doing ASMR stuff, if that's like your main jam, then, because it has like a stereo mode, that's really a good option.
Okay.
But otherwise, and especially for podcasting, not my favorite microphone.
Okay.
And there's two reasons for that. One is it picks out a ton of background noise. So like, especially if you have like kids or there's other people in the house or you like live in the city, it like picks up everything in the background, even on like the narrowest mode. So that's one problem with it. And the other problem with it is ultimately because all of the like preamps and digital conversion are internal to the microphone, it just kind of still has a pretty high noise floor. So there's a lot of in the background. And that wouldn't be as much of a problem if you were like recording vocals and singing where you sing louder than you talk, right?
Right.
But when we're podcasting and we're like talking all quiet, then the like internal noise of the microphone is a bigger deal.
Oh, okay.
Because like the volume of the voice is lower relative to the noise.
Yeah, okay.
The internal noise of the microphone.
Yeah.
That's a real problem with that. So not my favorite. But it's not terrible. If you do get it, though, you also kind of need accessories. It's really prone to popping. So you really do need like a windscreen with that kind of mic, or else it's just going to be popping all over the place from the air coming from your mouth. And you also really need a shock mount, not the stand that it comes with. A shock mount that you can put on a boom arm because, again, with that mic, it's really sensitive to like shocks. So if you just bump the table a little bit, then it's going to sound like an earthquake on the microphone. So lots of kind of practical issues with that microphone. That said, in a really quiet environment with one person talking loud, it can sound great. For ASMR, it can sound great.
Yeah.
Okay, so just throwing that out there because it's popular and it's not bad. What would I actually recommend? For somebody starting out, somebody getting into camming, I would recommend the Rode VideoMic Pro NTG. And this is a short shotgun microphone that has a USB-C to computer connection. It's a different type of microphone. You don't talk directly into this type of microphone like we do with the microphones we're using. You have to kind of put it off diagonally to your face about a foot away. And you don't push any air from your mouth towards it because it's really sensitive to popping.
Okay.
But it can pick up from a distance.
Okay.
And so it's really great. It's actually, designed to be mounted on top of a camera. But it really works great for podcasting, for camming, for other things as well. And the sound quality on this thing is phenomenal for the price and for the fact that you don't even need an audio interface. You just plug it directly in your computer. So it's like $250 right now, but it's all in one. It's like an all-in-one package. You can use it for doing dialogue, for any of your voiceovers for clips, for podcasting, anything like that. You can also then just slap it on top of your camera and use it for recording good sound alongside your video because you can plug it directly into your camera as well as plugging it directly into your computer. It has two outputs. And the best feature, and what's so awesome about it, is that you can also use that USB-C input and plug it directly into your phone. So it's also completely portable. You just put a little handle on the bottom of it, and you can go out and, record really very high quality audio on the go with just a cell phone. And I mean, it is so good. It is so good.
You are very excited.
I am. I mean, I think this thing is amazing. It's like a game changer. I actually wrote a review about it. I did a review video. The sound quality on this thing is so amazing that I am at the point that I'm not sure that it's even worth hauling our professional or our like semi-professional interface and microphones on the road anymore.
Yeah.
Because this thing, I mean, it's so lightweight. You just plug it into your phone and you're good to go.
Yeah.
And it takes more technique. Like I said, you got to point it diagonally. It's kind of a pain when you're interviewing people because they're always trying to talk directly in the microphone. You're like, stop doing that.
Yeah.
I know where to point the microphone. Just talk to me. But the sound quality is just unbelievably good for what it is. For $250, nothing even comes close. It literally sounds better than $1,000 setups that I've used. So I enthusiastically recommend that as like the best mic you can get for your money right now. Unfortunately, Amazon killed all of my affiliate links because they're not adult friendly.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to make
Sad.
I have to make like a site just for audio reviews that isn't on like our main website or something because nobody will let me do affiliate links because we're in the adult industry.
And you are like the biggest nerd who will talk up these products so much.
Yeah, they don't know what they're missing.
They really don't.
But you do. There's a couple other small things to mention with that. The little shock mount that comes with it sucks, but you can get a really decent one, shotgun microphone shock mount from a company called Movo on Amazon. You can get like a cheap boom arm from a company called Newer. There's lots of those options. And that makes a nice little desk setup for like podcasting and stuff. And really the only other thing you need is a pair of headphones for mixing. What I use is Sennheiser 650s, but like I also have those because I listen to a lot of music through my headphones at my desk station. Those really need a headphone amplifier, so you're getting into like lots of money there. But would highly, highly recommend as in cheapo, great sounding pair of headphones, the Samson SR850. These are, I don't know, they're like $40 or something and can easily be driven by a laptop. Like you just plug it in your laptop. And I mean, they sound very neutral, like very decent for mixing. I mean, they're not the best headphones in the world, but we use them on the road.
Yeah.
I don't take my studio headphones on the road. I take those and they're just fine. I'm not afraid to mix on them. I think they sound great. I think that's a really solid investment. So, that setup is what I would recommend for anybody interested in getting into podcasting. But again, also anybody who's like making clips, or camming. I mean, you can do it all with that setup. And that's what's so amazing about it.
Okay. That's a good wrap up. We can move on to the next question. Now is a good time to hit the pause button and head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/peepshowpodcast. Even $1 a month shows us that you care and want to see Peep Show continue to thrive. Also, you can help increase our reach with a review on iTunes.
Hey, PJ and Jessie, I would love to hear about some relationship stuff, like what it's like to be in the industry for you guys. Thanks.
Okay, so that was Allie Eve Knox who was asking us about how we negotiate being in the, industry as a couple. And I think, we've been in this for a long time and it's changed over time.
It's weird. I feel like we went from feeling like total newbie outsiders to being like old timers. And there was no like in between where I felt like we were just like in the industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I should say is that when you were in it first and when I met you, I didn't know anything about this world.
I think that probably surprises a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were camming before you met me. And when we got together, we talked about it on our first date. Like you told me that you had cammed and that this was your like academic area of interest too. And
yeah, because I started camming in grad school. I was like, I didn't have funding anymore. And I was like doing odd jobs, like a lot of photography and stuff, shooting weddings. But I was also like trying to get a cam hustle going. Then I just started writing about it, basically, is what happened. I started doing it and then I started writing about it.
Yeah. And like, it was funny because when we first got together, I don't know, very much like intimidated me at the beginning of our relationship, which is
funny in retrospect.
It is funny in retrospect because now like everyone in my world is sex workers basically.
Right.
And we like live in a world, like we live in a sex work world.
And I should say, I understood where you were coming from even at the time. Like I understand why anybody would feel that way. I mean,
it was your work, but it was also like the fact that in your research, you interacted with tons and tons of cam models and porn makers. Okay, I should also admit something, which is that I actually didn't watch porn either. So
that's it. I can see your follower count dropping as we speak.
Yeah, so I didn't know. First of all, porn was totally abstract to me. It was something that like these other people did and I didn't know anything about. And the idea that I just got into a relationship with some guy who talked to porn stars all day long every day like freaked me out. I don't know. I was like worried about the whole thing. So
I mean, it wasn't porn. And also, you know, it was still relatively early days for camming.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like
I didn't understand that it's like a job, like, which is so funny because now like I spend all my time talking about like how it's a job. But I think as a total outsider, which I was when I started my relationship with PJ, I'm so embarrassed right now because I'm like displaying my own ignorance.
I think that's fair because you know, I mean, it's worth being honest because I think other people go through these things, and you know, and I think it's worth talking through how it's not like we just magically, you know, jumped into camming with no questions or no struggles to like make sense of you know how this fit the boundaries of a relationship or whatever. Like,
it's funny to me because because I do a lot of media interviews, often I get asked what you think about the fact that I'm a sex worker. And that's so funny because the only conflicts we've had have gone in the other direction, like not you being like jealous or upset because you were so much more entrenched in sex work before you met me.
Well, that's not entirely true. It's true that like jealousy is not the issue I have. But when you are like really heavy working, like when you're heavy working phones, some days it's tough, like co-parenting and stuff. Sometimes I'm like, you know, oh my God, how is this phone call going on for like 2 hours? Like, I know we need the money. And it's like, I know we interact with your clients and like I interact with a lot of your clients. Sometimes we do shows together. It's not like I like some of your clients, you know, and I know that like it's not like I begrudge, you know, like I want you to be able to do your job. But like there are times we have conflicts just because it's like kids need 3 different things and I'm one person and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should kind of go backward a little bit to say that, I mean, one of the things that you're doing right now is you're talking about like where we are now and the fact that like I do most of the client interactions now. And a lot of that looks like one-on-one like relationships and phone calls and things like that. But that's not how it was.
No.
You know, at the beginning, we were camming together and...
Yeah, like, right, all the time and like together. And we did that for a couple of years.
Yeah, we did it for a couple of years until I realized that phone sex was a thing. And then I...
Yeah, you know, like, dropped it like a rock.
But yeah, I mean, now I primarily do phone sex and more one-on-one like client interactions.
And you still do some video stuff, but it's mostly with your phone sex clients, right?
Yeah. I still do like Skype shows with my phone sex clients sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's an interesting thing. So like at the beginning of our relationship, negotiated like my jealousy, but I don't even know if jealousy is the right word. It was more like fear. Like I had some like fear about what this meant because I didn't understand it. And then it's funny because our whole relationship has been like this growth in the industry.
Yeah.
I actually can't like pull them apart because our whole relationship, like we started our relationship and we started camming together. We developed our personas and our careers together.
Yeah. And if there's one thing I could say about that, I mean, it wasn't like when we met, I actually like very much discouraged you from getting into the industry. Like you had been recently divorced and like, you know, were... you know, figuring your stuff out.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm doing this. Like, I want you to know, like, what I do. But I definitely did not encourage you to get involved. I was like, I don't, you know, be responsible for that. Like, you know, and I knew that a lot of people have difficult experiences in the industry. I mean, there is a high burnout rate, and not just that, but I mean, there's such a very real stigma that comes along with it, you know, and then particularly when you're a parent, you worry about that stigma. You know, so for all those reasons, I was very much like, here's what I do. You know, like, I just want to be open about that. But like, you know, I never really like encouraged you to get involved. But I guess eventually I think you just wanted to try it out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I did, because it was a big part of your life and I wanted to know like what that was like. And I was curious about it, and we started camming together, and there was actually a lot of conflict about that. I think we stopped having conflict when I stopped camming because we just had different relationships to it. I have admitted this on the podcast before, but like, I hate camming. Like, it just wasn't a good fit for me. Like, I'm not a good cammer. I am an introvert. I'm not an exhibitionist, and PJ is. So like, you got a lot of like excitement and like rush from kind of the exhibitionism from it.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, it still felt like work to me a lot of the time, but I think,
but you liked that,
yeah, it was,
and I didn't like
right,
that,
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I was very comfortable in it, you know, like it was not, you know, I think we related it to it different.
Yeah, and I'm not a show person at all. Like, I do well at phone sex, and I like it because I very much like building relationships, and I like getting to know people. I have total stage fright. It was funny because when we used to cam together, like, if he would get up and go to the bathroom, I would be like terrified because I was like, what am I supposed to do with this room full of people with like him not there? Because you had to like hold down the social part of camming.
You mean I just made stupid jokes?
Yeah. But then we kind of diverged paths a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, we do a lot of clips together, and I like doing clips with you.
Right.
And I like doing clips. Like, there's an artistry to that I think I enjoy.
Yeah, we did a lot of clips together. I mean, punctuating all of this was 2 bouts of cancer. So for me, you know, the other half of this story is that, you know, I had cancer twice, and there were just periods where like I couldn't do this kind of work, and I'm still recovering.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there were times when I could do, you know, camming and clip work. And there are times when I just have to be behind the camera, and there are times when I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you know, moving forward, kind of post-COVID, and once my immune system recovers and everything, you know, hopefully I'll be back kind of fully at things.
Yeah.
But you know, that's also shaped some of the transitions, and, you know, the fact that you've done things more solo at times, or you know, there have been times where we've just produced less clips, and we've, you know, you've done more phone work or what, you know.
Right.
So, you know, unfortunately my health has definitely been a big factor in.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right to say that for us now, the bigger thing is balancing like work and life.
Yeah. I mean, it's not jealousy so much, though I understand why people, you know, have, you know, in a sort of mononormative culture. I understand why people have some of those struggles, though I think those of us who do the work are kind of like, really, there's, you know, like, like, you don't have to worry about me running off here, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it's not to say that you paid all of your clients or whatever, but it's just like...
No, I like them.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you're going to, like, run off with them.
Oh, no.
Right. It is tough, especially with, like, phone work, because it's like, you know, we'll be doing something and you randomly get a call, or, you know, you kind of go upstairs and disappear for a couple hours to take calls, and, you know, sometimes I don't know when you're going to come back, and then, you know, 10 things pile up, and it's a little hard because there's no totally fixed schedule. Like, even with camming, there was more of a fixed schedule.
Yeah.
But like with phone work, you kind of just have to be available. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have to be available, and you have no idea how long clients are going to want to talk. So then your phone rings, and somebody might get off in 10 minutes, or they might want to have a 2-hour conversation about their mom, you know, and like, you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you'll just disappear for a while because you're working, and
Yeah.
I'll be working in a different room or, whatever. And then I realize like 3 hours have passed.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I just took like 5 phone calls. And,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, we were supposed to take out the trash and do 5 other things.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that?
I think another thing, like in terms of relationship stuff, I feel like, and this is probably the most apparent in like clip stuff, is I feel like we had to learn, maybe this is more of my problem. I should say that like this is more of my problem, I think, than yours. But to be okay with the fact that we have totally different relationships to what we're doing. And even if we're creating something together, we like feel differently about it or are going about
Say
it
more
in
about
a different
that.
way. You like the art of making clips. And I
Yeah.
think that you very much enjoy getting the perfect shot and setting things up to have the lighting the way that you want it and all of this stuff, which is like so much a part of it. But to me,
I mean, I'm a photographer, we should say. Like before I ever got into the industry, I was always a photographer. I started as an amateur photographer when I was like 14. So
yeah. So for you, it's very much about like setting the scene and getting everything right and doing it over and over again. Like if it doesn't come out exactly right. And I have a much different relationship to like sex work than you do in that way, because for you, it's an art, and for me, it's much more like a politics of representation. And when I say that, what I mean is not that I don't care about the art of it, but rather that, because I do, and I think that the stuff that we make together is really beautiful. But I think that I am much more interested in like displaying my sexuality in a way that feels very authentic to me. And it's hard for me to do that if I'm like repeating the same like scene over and over again. Or
Right.
like,
Yeah, I feel
that there's this like kind of conflict in the way that we go about it, because I'm like, actually now I can't just conjure this up anymore. Now the moment is lost and I can't do it. And I wish we could have just had sex the way that we normally have sex, or, and
Right.
it's complicated too, because we're like a couple who also has sex like together outside of work. So things get kind of like mixed and mingled in ways that
and
are
like the porn
complicated.
sex is necessarily different. I mean, just for
Yeah.
angles and lighting and,
Right.
like you're holding your body up in different ways that you would just like not think about
Right.
when you're not on camera. I
Yeah.
mean, which isn't to say that our sex on camera isn't authentic, in its own way. I mean, we're enjoying it, and
Yeah.
it's like, I think it is authentic to what you can do on camera.
Right.
Right. But it's not like, but that doesn't mean it's like representational of like what our sex looks like
Yeah.
off of camera, which is like under the sheets in the dark. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And I think that actually, and what I meant by what I said at the beginning was that I had to kind of adjust, like both of us, I think, had to adjust the way that we were coming into it, because I felt like a lot of the things that you were doing was like taking me out of the mood, and because you have like such a drive to create something beautiful, like it was putting you in the mood to make it like perfect.
that's true. Yeah.
And I think that those are like different ways of like going about it. And
Yeah, the creative process definitely is like erotic. There's something about the process of like creating something beautifully sexy that is itself like erotic,
Right.
Yeah, especially if you're like have that energy with somebody and you're like
Yeah.
feeding back and forth on it.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
it's not like you feel that way with everybody or every artistic project or something, but like especially when I'm working with you, because that energy's already
Yeah.
there.
Right.
It like really is exciting to like turn that into something that beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
And I have to like work to get into that like mind frame.
yeah,
It's harder. It's not as natural for me, but it's not as natural for me, but also I'm not as much of a visual person. So,
right.
so it's harder for me to connect in that way. The way that my like sexuality works, I think, is that I very much want to feel like inside my own body. Like I need to get to a place where I feel very much like in touch with my own body, and being aware of like what that looks like pulls me out of that. So like I have to try very hard to do both of those things like simultaneously.
Yeah, I get that.
We also work with a lot of our friends to create content, but there's not that much to say about it because we do it pretty easily. There's not that much of a conflict about that. There's not one at all. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're careful who we work with. That's part of it. We try to develop relationships,
Yeah.
Which holds you back in some ways. I mean, we're not cranking out content like
That's true.
other
Yeah.
people. I mean, we do other sorts of work as well, but
Yeah.
but on the other hand, I feel like, the rapports we do have with the people we've worked with have been really
Pretty strong,
good.
yeah.
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 And so, I think that's really helped.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have like a very unique relationship where we do, I don't know, it's a weird experience. Like we both work together full time on like 90% of our projects. And we also have a very public marriage that I think is a unique experience. I mean, marriage is always kind of public, but...
Yeah, no, but I mean, because it's part of our sex work personas as well, and it really feeds into a lot of the sex work that we do, and it shapes the kinds of clients that you and we get. Totally shapes
the clients that I get. It's interesting. I think that there's a lot of people who don't want to work with me because they know who you are, and then I think the opposite is also true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so I think there's a lot of like bi-curious clients, a lot of people into cuckolding, a lot of people who are in just maybe like into the podcast or into, the other stuff we do, into our writing or whatever, right. And think it's kind of interesting that both of us are doing that.
Yeah.
But then also like coming together to create porn.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the people who are interested in what we're making, for one reason or another, are like kind of interested in us as a couple. I mean, I can't say that's everybody, but it's a good chunk.
Even people who you've never interacted with, most of the people who talk to me will ask about you, you know, and especially when you were sick. Like I got a lot of love and a lot of outpouring from clients who, when you were sick, they would ask how you were doing and, ask if I'm okay because they know that even if they didn't know you, like would say things like, "Oh, I saw you have a sick husband. Is he okay?" And I think that there was a lot of a lot of respect for our relationship and for that like sort of boundary.
Yeah. I think, and I mean, I thought that was actually really nice and, heartening.
Mm-hmm.
And people have also like stuck with us through a lot of stuff. I mean, we've had absences and, and people have waited that out and, been there on the other side. And, and that's also been heartening.
For sure.
You were talking earlier about representation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe talk a little bit more about like what representation means to you, like what it is that you're representing.
Yeah. Okay. So I think about this a lot and I write about this a lot too. Like, I mean, simply, I am 42. I'm much older than most of the people who we know and work with in this industry.
And me.
And you. Okay. I'm also much older than you. I'm 42. I am plus size. I am a mom. What?
Nothing.
You're making funny faces. It is important to me, I should say, to continue to be sexy and to like take up space in to take up space as a larger woman, but also just to like to be here. And this is actually, I'm having a hard time articulating this right now, and I'm not sure why, because I talk about this a lot, but it's not just my body. Like a lot of it is my body, and a lot of people interact really directly with my body. And when I say that, I mean that I get a lot of messages and comments from clients, but also from a lot of women who say that they appreciate me being here because my body looks like theirs, or men will say that my body looks like their wives or their like girlfriends or whatever. And that these are bodies that aren't like the porn bodies. And I'm putting like scare quotes around that because obviously porn bodies are all kinds of bodies.
Yeah, but mainstream.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at who's on stage at AVN, there's a like very narrow window of like sizes and shapes and
so I mean that's important to me, but it's also important to me to be very authentic to myself and to my own like sexuality. And when I said that, the performance part is hard for me, it is hard for me, but that's actually been okay because the people who have connected to me have connected to like being a part of my world and my like sexuality as it is. So I don't play parts. I don't do a lot of things. And it's not because I think I'm like incapable of it, but it's more because I want to approach my work and I want to approach my relationships in a way that feels very like grounded in myself.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty like clear about the fact that like I am in my 40s, I have gray hair, I'm a size 16. Like embracing all of those things is like in large part what the good things that I get out of it. So sex work is always work, but there are things that feed into like our own desires, right? So a lot of my own desires have to do with being able to be like myself and to be like sexual in myself and have that be okay.
And to be desired.
To be desired. I do. I like to be worshipped.
Yeah.
I'm super into like body worship.
Right. So it's good to have like a whole collection of men's.
It is good to have a collection of men who like deeply desire me. Yeah. And I think that that's actually why that sort of like authenticity is important to me, because I want it to be connected to like me as a person or like me in the way that I experience my own body or something, which is funny because PJ will hear me talking to my clients and sometimes he can't necessarily hear what they're saying, but he can hear like how I'm reacting to it.
Yeah. I mean, you walk by and sometimes I hear your reactions.
Yeah. And he'll say to me after I hang up, he'll be like, clearly he wanted you to say this one thing. Why don't you just give him what he wants? And I'm like, because I don't want to. Like, I just don't want to. I want to do it the way that I want to do it. So, yeah, I don't know. I think you usually find that kind of ridiculous.
I just find it amusing. Well, I like that they like it. I mean, I like that they keep coming back. It's funny to me. I mean, like you're so obviously like refusing to like give them what they want. There's some like masochistic pleasure they must be taking in the fact that you're so difficult with them. But hey, like good on them.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that that's kind of where we're coming from. And I think that you come at it from a totally different perspective, which is that you kind of like the exhibitionism of it. You like the artistry of it, but it's less about being yourself or displaying like yourself and more about creating something.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, the truth is that honestly, in my ideal world, if I could just, make a living doing like stills, doing artistic stills with models, I would do that. I would much rather put like 2 hours into perfectly, like editing a photo and, getting the exact right angle and lighting to make that one thing, that one image that was perfect to me.
Yeah.
Then to whatever, even be in the scene or whatever else,
right.
But it's not that I don't enjoy the other stuff. And you're right. I do kind of enjoy some of the exhibitionist elements of it. But a lot of what attracts me to the work is the excitement of producing something beautiful, which, isn't all the time. I mean, you're cranking out content and you don't always have the time to spend, but sometimes everything lines up and you have an opportunity to make something beautiful. And that's really exciting when you do.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Hey, I would love to hear about how things have changed since you've started, like the technology, laws, anything like that. Like, how has it evolved in the last 10 years?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, FOSTA, SESTA.
That's what I was going to say. 2 words, FOSTA, SESTA. No, I mean, a lot of changes, but holy shit, that was probably the biggest one.
Yeah. I mean, that totally shaped our whole lives when that started in ways that we didn't expect, because we started the podcast and then we're like, shit, we have to spend the next year of our life talking about nothing but FOSTA, SESTA.
Right. And I mean, it changed so much because, I mean, platforms have always been shitty to sex workers. There's long been a pattern of like using sex workers to help build platforms and attract users to platforms, and then at some point like purging sex workers in order to like legitimate. And I mean,
yeah, OnlyFans is like seems to be starting that now.
yeah, or like indicating that. But I mean, certainly we saw that with Patreon. You know,
Tumblr.
Yeah, I mean, it's so complicated with Tumblr, but God, you know, RIP. You know, in weird ways, Snapchat. I mean, Snapchat has always been like vocally anti-sex work, but realistically, we knew that like, you know, they were benefiting from sex workers. But what Fosta Sesta did is just kind of push all of the websites into making much more draconian rules about, you know, sex work, or nudity or anything that, you know, smelled of sex work, because of fear that they would be seen as quote unquote facilitating prostitution, which is what Fosta Sesta made illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so when you asked that question, that's the first thing that I thought of was how the landscape changed with Fosta Sesta. But I also feel like there's so many other things too. I mean, there's Fosta Sesta. There's also COVID. And I think that like COVID has totally changed the landscape too.
Yeah, I would totally agree. But
yeah,
what do you think specifically?
I feel like as somebody who's done mostly online sex work, that there was a long period of time in which people who did online sex work weren't considered to be like real sex workers, where there was like a lot of like animosity between people who are doing in-person work and online sex workers.
But and even between mainstream porn and like independent porn or camming, I mean, there used to be a lot of like animosity and just frankly hierarchy coming from like mainstream porn that.
Yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing that has happened in the last 4 months is that suddenly the jobs that we have been doing are the jobs that sex workers across the board in all sectors of sex work have come to and are doing.
Trying to do, yeah.
Yeah. And it feels to me like there's been this huge shift away from kind of denigrating online sex workers to being like, oh, actually, this is kind of hard. And this hustle is like rough to hustle for $3 pussy pictures on OnlyFans or something, you know, is like a job that you have to like actually be skilled to pull off. And I think that this has shifted. And the other thing that I was thinking about too, I feel like there's been an intensification of interest in sex work from media and people outside of the industry that has also changed since I've been in here.
Oh, that's definitely true. Well, sex work in general and online sex work in particular, I mean, so I can say this as like a, you know, researcher who was like writing on it. There was a time when I started writing on camming where like I literally could just like have a list of all the articles written about camming, you know, and that's just inconceivable now. There's been like a million.
Right.
You know, so it's definitely gained a lot more mainstream attention.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think those are some of the big things that I've been noticing. I think that by and large, sex work is very fluid, and most sex workers many sex workers are doing moving back and forth between a lot of different types of work. But that doesn't mean that there isn't like a primary thing that they market or like push forward. And I think that those boundaries between online work and in-person work and dom work and whatever like it is that you're pushing forward, those boundaries are getting less and less rigid.
Yeah.
Particularly with COVID and also with Fosta Sesta, because with Fosta Sesta too, and now Earn It that's coming up, there has been increased interest in the fact that what's happening online is impacting people in in-person work and vice versa. And
everybody's suspected of doing full service work, whether you actually do or not.
Right.
You know, like the platforms are treating, you know, really any discussion of sex work as potentially quote unquote facilitating prostitution. And so like they're cracking down on all types of sex work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do think that's, I mean, there's so many other trends. I mean, that's also the fact that like mainstream porn, you know, went through a collapse and,
yeah, right.
you know, a lot of people started doing full service work. And,
Right.
it's just, it's complicated.
And it's also the case that like right now there's kind of a Me Too thing that's happening within like porn that's pushing a lot of people who are in mainstream porn to want to move into more independent production. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, a lot of fluidity between different kinds of sex work. But, I think in all of these cases, that means that like a lot of people have been like circulating in and out of our line, the online sex work that we talk about most, because that's what we have the most experience with.
I also think as a phone sex operator that when I first started doing phone sex and I was living mostly like in a camming world, that like most cam models weren't doing phone sex, and people were like, oh, that still exists? That's so wild. And now I feel like everybody has decided to like move into that lane as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's really taken off. One big change over the last decade is just the saturation of the market. I mean, it used to be the like ratio of performer to client. There were much fewer performers, and it was just frankly easier to get into the industry, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And these days there's just an incredible saturation of performers, and COVID has only intensified that further. And so I think that's one, big difference. Now, there's more resources out there, starting today, which is cool.
Yeah.
Right. You really kind of were on your own. It was much more like the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Even before I started, because, I would like had an eye on it, long before I actually started, and was friends with lots of sex workers and yada, yada. I'm not saying it was easy then, but it seemed like, there's just less competition.
Yeah.
And things were just less professionalized. I think that's another point, right? Things have become so professionalized now. The quality of what people, are doing in terms of like producing clips and camming. I mean, people are using like professional cameras, people are using professional sound equipment, people have like, sophisticated lighting setups and backdrops, or, just studios that they, in their house that they make content in. And so there's, really, I think, been a professionalization of, the technology and the craft, but also like the business end,
right,
as well. People are keeping spreadsheets and like really figuring out how to maximize their output and their earnings. And again, it just, I think, was a little more Wild West.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, OnlyFans has these like massive Telegram groups that are, doing these sorts of like swaps and stuff. So there's a lot of that's going on.
Well, I mean, there's always been like forums and stuff, but I guess it's just more, more routinized. And I mean, there's awards and stuff now. I mean, it's just the whole industry has grown and kind of, I think, professionalized in a ton of different ways. I don't know, looking back, I mean, geez, I remember when tip-activated toys first came on the scene. It was probably like 2011, 2012, maybe 2012. They're, originally the way they worked is there was like a little microphone, that was kind of connected to a vibrator. The original idea being that you could get off listening to your favorite music or at a club or something. And cam models were like, oh, we could totally use this. And, you'd literally put the microphone next to the speaker. And so when like the little token noise ching like went off, it would vibrate. I mean, it really worked poorly, right?
Yeah.
And people, were like really, really faking hard, like comically. But I remember when that swept things. But yeah, I mean, there's been so many sites that have emerged. Some didn't make it. Clearly the subscription OnlyFans type model, is really super popular now. It seemed like that was preceded by like the Snapchat, subscription model. So I don't know. I think it's just interesting because like the models in which like online sex work has been done, like the way that people have like monetized that sex work, I think have changed over time, and there's like different trends, and the clients move to different places.
Yeah.
So now there's a lot more clip stores and subscription sites.
Yeah.
And if 8 years ago it was much more like cam rooms.
Right.
I mean, not that there wasn't, some other things, but a lot of people were just like selling videos out of, their Google Drive, right?
Yeah, right.
Like back then. So
Yeah.
it was just very different.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, that's like professionalization. That's a great example of, that's like such an amateur. It's like selling your CDs out of your trunk versus, selling your CDs at like, the record store, which I know doesn't exist anymore. But
yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's been really interesting. I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I've noticed, like I've said, is that there's kind of a breakdown of the divisions between different types of sex workers. And I honestly, like, to me, I think that's a good thing, because we need like more solidarity and more understanding. And I've seen some of that, especially with COVID, but I think it was happening before that as well.
I don't know. Another big thing for me is the kind of death of GIF porn. I mean,
oh yeah, you talk about that a lot.
I mean, it's not that it doesn't exist, but when we lost Tumblr, the format worked so well for GIF porn, and I know there are like other sites, and I know there's Reddit, but it's not what it used to be, and the marketing of clips and porn have moved away from the GIF, and I thought GIF porn was really hot. Like I like it. I think it was really so. That was like one sad consequence of these tightening rules around sex work.
Yeah, I like GIFs too.
Yeah,
usually more than like full clips. I like the like glimpse into something.
Yeah, I mean, it's very like Peepshow-y.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that too. It's seductive.
Yeah, it is seductive.
It's you get like a little glimpse. On the flip side, I think audio porn has exploded.
Yeah.
I think it's still like, I think it's beginning to explode. I think it's something that's, the trajectory is for it to get much bigger. There's a growing interest in audio only stuff or audio focused stuff.
Yeah.
Which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, same.
Twitter has been around since 2008, but I think, over the past decade, we've really seen, the emergence and explosion of sex work Twitter as like this really, really core hub of political organizing and like resource sharing.
Yeah.
And like mutual education, and and I think that that's an important story. And I mean, it always feels tenuous because we're like, at the mercy of Twitter.
Yeah.
And we've seen, in recent years, like shadow banning become a thing that's really, really affected sex workers.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we all seem to get around it, and it's, it still seems to be thriving.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just like a bunch of random things. I guess it was just kind of piecemeal.
If I was going to say something over the last like 10 years, I feel like the main shifts have been an explosion of like camming and DIY independent production, a shift like in numbers at least away from mainstream porn production into this like indie cam field. And then like legally and in terms of like global politics, like FOSTA, SESTA, and Earn It and COVID and all of those things have like shaped the way that we work and interact with one another in ways that are really profound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was this has been an interesting episode. I hope you guys like listening to PJ and I talk to each other.
Normally we like say where we can find people. I don't know.
Yeah, you can find me at jessiesage.com, at sapiotextual, at OnlyFans/sapiotextual.
Yeah.
On Night Flirt, on Sex Panther, on Minivids, and on Peepshow.
Yeah.
What about you?
You can find me on, Manyvids or pagesage.com.
Oh, you know what we should say?
What?
Is that, okay, so while we're doing this whole couple thing, we want to start taking Night Flirt calls together.
Oh, roll out the big announcement.
Yeah. which I wasn't planning to announce, but we want to start taking night flirt calls together. We think it would be really fun to like introduce some people into our dynamic in a more sexual way than this, which wasn't sexual at all. And we are also would like to do like some Skype shows in relationship to that. So we're going to set up a night flirt listing that's in the couple section. And you all, if you like listening to us on the podcast, would also really like hearing us have sex.
Definitely.
Okay, that's it.
That's good. Yeah, I like it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for hanging out with us.
Yeah. See you next week. Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of the Peepshow podcast. I'm PJ Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at PeachSage.
And I'm Jessie Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at sapiotextual or at jessiesage.com.
We would like to remind you that we have a Patreon account and would appreciate your support. Please visit patreon.com/peepshowpodcast. Our music is courtesy of Joe Kennedy. The show was produced by Jessie and PJ Sage.
Signing off. Have a great week.